Young member for St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I first, of course, wish to thank the great people of St. James North for again giving me this now my fourth opportunity to speak in the estimates on their behalf. I wish to start by commending the presentation yesterday by the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. It was delivered in a statesman-like, mature manner, shows that she's ready and fit to take up the mantle of Prime Minister of this country whenever the election is called. The Honourable Minister of Finance said yesterday that Cabinet has not lost faith in the people of Barbados. However, I can assure him, Mr. Speaker, that Barbadians have lost faith in the Cabinet. These estimates confirm that this Cabinet has continued incompetence, ineptness, and an inability to properly manage the affairs of this government. Our country is now the third most indebted country globally, with a debt-to-GDP ratio in the region of 150%. This government has more than doubled Barbados's public sector debt. It has almost doubled its external debt, as my parliamentary colleague, the Honourable Member for St. George South, spoke this morning. Additionally, this government presently owes individual Barbadians, businesses and companies approximately $1 billion in VAT and income tax returns, in some cases for 4 years, that it is unable to pay, or which it refuses or neglects to pay. In addition, government owes contract fees to many companies, businesses and private individuals would not pay. This has been the height of economic mismanagement by any government in this country, not only in this country but in the region and globally. Before this Democratic Labour Party took the reins of office of this country 9 years ago, we were the leading developing country in the world, realistically aiming to reach first world status by the year 2025. In the wake of the 18th and 19th downgrade, successive, in terms of our credit ratings within the last 2 weeks, our nation is now being categorized, Mr. Speaker, you can imagine, by international financial credit rating experts with such countries as Venezuela and Greece and Iraq and the Congo, war-torn Congo and Mozambique. That is where we are now find ourselves. That's where the Barbados brand has now descended to under this government. Under this cabinet, after 6 failed economic pathways to progress in 9 years, we now have less than $700 million in foreign reserves, or 10 weeks import cover, down from $2.7 billion when the Democratic Labour Party took office. The economic management by this government has been more disastrous for our country than all the hurricanes which have passed through Barbados put together. The situation is compounded by the fact that this administration continues, led by no other than the Right Honourable Prime Minister, to dismiss the warnings of Standards and Poor's and Moody's and all the other institutions. And these are institutions, Mr. Speaker, because I realize that about 99% of Barbadians don't know this. These are institutions that the Barbados government pays to do these assessments. It isn't that Standards and Poor's and Moody's come like a thief in the night and say, let me up and do an assessment of Barbados today. We pay them to do these assessments because we are part of the international financial community, part of the IMF, part of the World Bank, and they pay. They have no brief for the Barbados Labour Party or any axe to grind against the Democratic Labour Party to compound our catastrophic situation. Our economic outlook is viewed as negative. In other words, Mr. Speaker, going down the line for the next 6 months, you don't see any improvement. It's going to get worse. We are now 6 categories below investment grade in this country. The Right Honourable Prime Minister, whose lack of understanding of the economic realities which face our nation is quite frankly quite frightening, continues to rubbish these assessments and says that they are of no real consequence, since his government does not intend to borrow externally. Of course, as is usual, the honourable member for St. James South has contradicted what he has said, as he does every week, on some issue or another, by today saying that you have to pay this attention, because international people who are looking to invest in Barbados look at these credit ratings. Barbadian companies, when they want to invest in the bonds and treasury bills and debentures that the Barbados government issues, pay credence to these credit ratings. And the honourable member for St. James South is just as correct as the Right Honourable Prime Minister is wrong. The truth is that each of these downgrades result in millions of additional Barbados taxpayers' dollars having to be found to pay interest on our external loans. The Credit Suisse loan alone, which this administration entered into 2015, will now cost us about $4.5 million more in additional interest every 6 months, not coming out of the cabinet of Barbados' pocket, but out of the poor, suffering people, taxpayers of Barbados. It will now be more difficult to entice international companies to home base on our shores, since Barbados' poor credit rating will affect their credit rating. And honourable member for St. Lucie, who totally misunderstood, as he misunderstands virtually everything else on economics. We have seen the repercussions of this 2 years ago when Sagicor removed one of its headquarters out of our country. And when I think they had to write the Right Honourable Prime Minister for the honourable member for St. Lucie for the political foolishness he went on radio and spoke about. We are clearly not going to be able to get out of this economic malaise which this government has placed us in unless we deal with our public debt. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition said so yesterday. The Right Honourable Member for St. Peter has said so on many occasions, as recently as 2 hours in here in this Parliament. And in their own camp, the frustrated Honourable Member of St. Philip West says so all the time, twice within the last 2 weeks. But yet, they ignore all of these honourable members. As my parliamentary colleague, the Honourable Member for St. George South said this morning, we need to reprofile our debt in order to lengthen our maturity dates for their repayment and lower our interest payments in a fair and equitable manner. It is not going to go away. It is no use ignoring it. As the Democratic Labour Party cabinet, it obviously feels it could do. Tomorrow morning when we wake up, it's still going to be there. This government is incapable of managing this absolutely necessary task, since it now has no credibility whatsoever with our creditors, whether local or foreign. We have no choice on this issue. Where those 3 members that I mentioned, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, the Right Honourable Member for St. Peter, the Honourable Member for St. Philip West, may differ in terms of the details of the need to reprofile our debt, they all agree with this on principle. Last year alone, governments spent $1.6 billion on debt servicing. This was double what it spent on education and social protection of our people. We spent 6% less, in other words, Mr. Speaker, on social protection during this current financial year than what we spent during the previous financial year. And the Honourable Member who just spoke, the member for St. Michael Central, speaks about how that party seeking to protect the most vulnerable and spending more on debt servicing than on social protection and education. This government, in the immediate aftermath of last elections, furthermore, knifed 12% cut across all the social service sectors in this country, including the Ministry of Social Care and Welfare. The Honourable Minister of Finance yesterday said we now have to be brutally frank with Barbadians. A lot of political rhetoric, because this Democratic Labour Party government has proved incapable of doing that. Last election, to bring an old woman on a bus, the most absurd political advertisement I have ever seen anywhere in the world, to talk about how the Barbados Labour Party can send home 10,000 people and cut school meals and all kind of thing to win an election. But yet, the Honourable Member for St. Michael, North West, talks about being brutally frank with Barbadians. Never will the Democratic Labour Party do that on the eve of another election. The people, the simple fact is, have no trust or confidence in this Democratic Labour Party cabinet anymore. This is the same Democratic Labour Party that now asking for help from the opposition and from other stakeholders, when on many occasions in here, the Honourable Minister of the Environment, the Honourable Minister of Culture would tell you that they don't want to hear anything from the Barbados Labour Party, how the people hand them a mandate and how we can't tell them what to do. And we only making a lot of noise, could only make a lot of noise, according to the Honourable Minister of Education. And this in spite of the fact that the members on that side, Mr. Speaker, are only sitting over there by virtue of a minibus load of votes in St. Michael Central. That is all that separated election victory and defeat here. And the Honourable Member for St. Michael Central, the beneficiary of the minibus load of votes, just delivered himself of what has to be one of the most pathetic speeches ever in this Parliament, criticizing freedom of the press, something that is enshrined in the laws of Barbados. Just because the press starting to criticize the Democratic Labour Party, he criticizing the press, does not understand the first thing about governance and systems. When the sole government station in this country in debt $115 million, why you don't deal with that? That does not report anything from the Barbados Labour Party. Got it in debt, $115 million of taxpayers' money. The only solution to the diminishing of the Barbados brand is a fresh mandate being given to a new government. We are not going anywhere in these final days, whether it's a year, a few months, whatever, of this Democratic Labour Party cabinet. These estimates, like all the recent estimates presented by this administration to this Parliament, are a fairy tale. This legislature, for example, last year approved $68 million for road network services. Yet, numerous roads throughout the length and breadth of this country today remain unrepaired and full of potholes. Certainly none of the 12 roads in my constituency, which I wrote the Public Works Minister on for repairs within 50 days of my becoming a Member of Parliament, have been repaired. And in fact, 8 of those 12 roads on which I wrote that honourable member are in a previous DLP stronghold of the Women Aston Hall. Yet not one pothole there fixed, Farless Road. Professor Winston Moore has stated, of the University of the West Indies, has stated the irrefutable truth when he reveals that the economy of Barbados has grown on average 2.2% more over the last 40 years under a Barbados Labour Party administration than it has under a DLP government. That is irrefutable. Can't debate that. The Honourable Minister of Finance himself has recognised that his administration cannot hope to win the next elections on the basis of superior economic management. He therefore stated a few months ago that the next general elections will be fought on morality and not on economics. Jeremy Bentham, British philosopher, regarded as the founder of modern utilitarianism, stated in the 18th century that the greatest happiness of the greatest number is the foundation of morals and legislation. The greatest number of Barbadians at the present moment are the unhappiest that they have been in the 50 years of independence. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, is it moral for a cabinet to pay themselves an 11-month retroactive increase in their salary from what it was last month, resulting in a pay package of over $35,000 this month alone to each of the cabinet ministers sitting over there, and over $40,000 to the Prime Minister, to the Right Honourable Prime Minister, when over 25,000 public workers have not received a salary increase in 8 years? Is it moral for this backdated increase to also apply to their personal assistants and their fellow parliamentarians, both in here and in the Senate, and their political operatives, and their 50-odd consultants in various statutory boards and ministries, many of whom are unsuccessful failed DLP candidates? Given this, is it moral for these estimates not to make any provision whatsoever for any salary increase for the public workers in all of the harsh realities of life in Barbados today?
Yes, I remember.
The honourable member is misleading the House by suggesting that members of cabinet receive a salary increase and retroactive pay. That is totally untrue, and I would challenge the member to produce the evidence in this House. Totally untrue.
I remember.
Mr. Speaker, the order that was signed by the Honourable Minister of Finance on the 14th of February 2016 and which was brought before this Parliament 2 months ago clearly says that the 10% restoration would take effect from the 1st of April 2016.
Yes, I remember.
Speaker, again, the honourable member in his totality of his presentation is misleading the House. On the one hand, he's saying that the members of cabinet, and of course including himself, were the beneficiaries of a salary increase, but then on the other hand he's talking about a restoration of salary. Which one is it he's talking about?
Yes, I remember.
Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is that this month, cabinet ministers, their political assistants, operatives, fellow parliamentarians, because the Barbados Labour Party is not taking the 10%.
Yes, I remember. Yes, I remember.
The honourable member knows that you can't anticipate in this House, that there's a rule against anticipation.
Honourable, please continue.
That they will get 10% more money in their salary than what they got last month. That is an increase. The people of Barbados understand that. Simple English.
Yes, honourable member.
Member is misleading the House. A restoration of salary is not an increase in salary, and that's a fact. He cannot be stating to the House something that is not fact.
Yes, well, this thing has been coming up time and time again. They call it restoration. The honourable members of government has explained time and time again that is not a salary increase. I think everybody knows what it is, so I am not really going to. Well, I'm not going to get involved in the semantics one every day that it comes up. Honourable member, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is it moral for a Right Honourable Prime Minister to promise a few months before elections not to lay off a single government employee, but to, within a year after the elections, preside over the dismissal of almost 4,000 such employees? Some such as the drainage workers.
Yes, honourable member, just a minute, another point of order. Yes, please.
The honourable member is misleading the House because in no way the honourable member can prove that any 4,000 people were dismissed. It's not even 2,000, and the honourable member knows that.
Well, that doesn't say I can rule on either. Honourable member, please continue.
Some such as drainage workers unceremoniously dismissed, Mr. Speaker, some of whom are my constituents and whom the Right Honourable Prime Minister himself publicly said that they were treated very, 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 very badly. Is it moral for a government to dismiss Beautify Barbados employees over 3 years ago, against some of them my constituents, without paying them any compensation beyond 1 week's wages up to the present day? Is it moral for a Right Honourable Prime Minister to allow his Environment Minister carte blanche to preside over the unfair dismissal of 200 NCC workers, again some of them my constituents, treated worse than indentured servants of the 19th century, with the taxpayers of this country then having to find over $3 million to compensate these Barbadians? Would it not have been moral for the Right Honourable Member for St. Michael South to request that Honourable Member to himself repay the Treasury this money, as a Caribbean Court of Justice case arising on appeal from Belize says he should do, since those dismissals were unfair and were tainted with malfeasance? Is it moral for a government to legislate and enforce 36 new or increased taxes on the backs of the people of Barbados, including the 2.5% increase in VAT, the 2% social responsibility levy? That is not even the law of the land, because the 4-month period after which it should have been brought before this Parliament to get the validation by law has gone since December last year. And the government collecting this 2% social responsibility levy on the backs of the poor people of this country without legislative authority to do that. In addition, among the 36 new or increased taxes on the backs of the people of this country, a cell phone tax, increased land taxes, a 60% increase in water rates, a tipping fee, increased road taxes, a consolidation tax, a municipal solid waste tax, a bank's assets tax, imposed tuition fees on UWI students, taxation of entertainment allowance, taxation on travel allowance, removal of tax concessions on donations to charities and churches, except for one, fees charged to file annual limited liability company returns, a drug dispensary fee, and most recently now, enforcement of VAT on over-the-counter medicines. Is it moral for a cabinet, under these circumstances, where over 55,000 Barbadians, including a significant amount of people with disabilities, are living below the poverty line, according to the last CDB poverty report? Is it moral, therefore, for a cabinet to preside over the decline in welfare benefits to the most vulnerable in our society, as well as over the decline in the provision of social services, including water, including storage elimination and garbage collection? Garbage a few months ago being collected only once in every 3 weeks in some areas. All of these social services which Barbadians had come to become accustomed to as a matter of course, being totally taken away from us in spite of the 36 new taxes or increasing taxes. And a government still overseeing a 40% increase in cost of living in the 9 years they have been in office.
Honourable Member, you have 4 minutes in which to
After promising a reduction in the cost of living to win the 2008 elections. Is it moral for a political administration which in 2008 promised that at least 40% of all government procurement requests for goods and services would be reserved for sourcing from the economically disadvantaged classes, to instead continue to enrich 2 or 3 big conglomerates with serious implications for campaign financing, and with so far over $500 million in untendered government contracts going to one man whose initials spelled the same as the opposition leaders? Is it moral for the Prime Minister to refuse to take the Prevention of Corruption Act passed in this Parliament in the last session in 2012 for its assent, saying that the government cannot afford the cost of establishing an 8-member commission and token staff, but could instead afford an initial 420 constituency council membership for partisan purposes? The chair of Transparency International said that corruption denies education, health, housing, better conditions of life for millions of people around the world. It is a tax paid by the poorest. Is it moral, Mr. Speaker, for the Prime Minister to refuse to bring to Parliament integrity in public life legislation, which the Democratic Labour Party promised to enact forthwith in its 2008 elections campaign? Is it moral, Mr. Speaker, to allow DLP-affiliated lawyers retained by statutory corporations and other government agencies to charge fees routinely in excess of $1 million on legal transactions, invariably 5 and 6 times more than what they should charge on the scale of legal fees? What repercussions does this have for campaign financing, which is regulated under the same Prevention of Corruption legislation, which the government has steadfastly refused to bring into law? Is it moral, Mr. Speaker, for an individual to receive apparent protection from the justice system when he has presided over the financial destruction of over 30,000 Barbados policyholders who innocently invested in Clico and Baco? And when the Prime Minister has referred to him as my pal, I challenge the various churches to join us and speak out against this type of political behavior. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition has outlined in her speech to the Chamber of Commerce 4 months ago, rebuilding investor confidence in brand Barbados, which I will make a document of the House. She's outlined the course of a new Barbados Labour Party government, the course that we will take to transform our country. We need to address our fiscal governance, to stop central banks from printing money, to stimulate and facilitate economic growth, to ease the process for citizens and foreign investors alike to do business in what is now an increasingly harsh economic business environment in this country, which has made Barbados one of the most uncompetitive countries in the world. We need, as the Honourable Leader of the Opposition said, to have zero tolerance for corruption, zero tolerance for bribery, zero tolerance for thievery in high places. We need to strengthen our critical institutions and deepen the involvement of our people. Our Covenant for Hope outlines all of these things and the primary goals of the Barbados Labour Party, including the protection of our children and the most vulnerable of our citizens, and the alleviation of poverty, and the empowerment of our young people and elderly and people with disabilities, and the strengthening of our family and communities. Mr. Speaker, morality is not about one's ability to quote St. Paul's of the Corinthians at will. The Democratic Labour Party has lost its moral authority to govern Barbadians anymore. These estimates will do nothing to improve the standard of living of Barbadians who do not belong to the DLP fatted calf, and will do nothing to restore the confidence which is necessary for our country to be upgraded again. I'm obliged to you, Mr. Speaker.
Obliged.